unprecedented has lost its meaning. And because we're all so uncertain and scared, we don't really know what to call the times we live in right now. It's a global pandemic. I totally get it. And I felt kind of frustrated, as if all of us, meaning all of us in B2B marketing, and marketing, capital M in general, had forgotten everything that we've learned over the last, 20, 25 years as the industry has gone digital. We are more prepared for this moment than I think we give ourselves credit for. And I don't blame us for feeling scared. I do believe that we're better suited to step up in the ways that our companies need us to right now than we tend to think and that we've been writing about. So.
And that's a wrap. The weekly wrap, ending May 29th, 2020. This week has us wondering, are we bouncing back or are we bouncing forward? Should we be planning for an economic bounce back and the disruptive change we really, really need? So let's wrap it up, shall we? Our theme this week, resilience. It's kind of like replacing your favorite ragged t-shirt. The one the washing machine finally destroyed? You'll get used to the new one, and it'll eventually become your new favorite. That's resilience. And this is the Weekly Wrap. Hello everybody, welcome to episode number 72 of the Weekly Wrap, our weekly play on words at play in the continuing and masquerading service-only world of quarantine this week. And by the way, this is our first episode available in our fancy new video format, which we're going to post both on the show post and on YouTube. So this week, we're going to be showing some backbone for resilience. So we've got one deep thought for you that's going to, let you know it's going tibia okay. It won't be baloney. Oh yeah, I really did both of those things. We have a funny news item that you might find humorous, and we've got one spine-tingling content marketing tip that's got your back. Anyway, of course, it's all going to be delivered in a little less time than it takes for Lake of the Ozark swimming pool to get really, really nasty. As always, I'm your host, Robert Rose, Chief Strategy Advisor for the Content Marketing Institute, and it's time to get this week's show underway.
You're soaking.
No, I'm fine. Comes a point when you're so wet you can't get any wetter.
Okay, I'll come up.
No, please don't. I just want to check you're okay. Not busy killing yourself or anything, but you're fine, so. I shouldn't have come to the church this morning. I'm sorry.
No. Wait. It was all my fault. I mean, I'm the bastard here. And it definitely sorted out one thing, which is marriage and me were very clearly not meant for one another. Sorted out another big thing as well. There I was standing there in the church, and for the first time in my whole life, I realized I totally and utterly loved one person. And it wasn't the person standing next to me in the veil, it's the person standing opposite me now, in the rain.
Is it still raining? I hadn't noticed.
The truth of it is, I loved you from the first second I met you. You're not suddenly going to go away again, are you?
No. I might drown, but otherwise, no.
Okay. We'll go in. But first, let me ask you one thing. Do you think, after we've dried off, after we've spent lots more time together, you might agree not to marry me? And do you think not being married to me might maybe be something you could consider doing for the rest of your life? Do you?
I do.
How resilient are you? The world right now is filled with near constant uncertainty and change, truly in flux. You might say things are fluxed up. But over the last few months, our best laid plans, our activities, they've been stretched, compressed, and generally bent out of shape. It seems like every day we're asking if this is the right time to be back, relaunch that blog initiative that we put on hold, go back to our editorial calendar, selling the way we did before, or even go back to work full stop. The word resilience gets brought up a lot. How resilient are we? You know, our ability to recover quickly from our stresses and bounce back into our original shape. And measuring this capability, it seems like it should be an important part of our strategy going forward. But can we measure that? Can we measure the ability to bounce back, our resilience? Well, as it turns out, it's a popular question, and there are innumerable frameworks that have been developed around the idea of measuring resilience. A simple Google search reveals dozens of such frameworks, like the Connor-Davidson Resilience Scale, the Resilience Scale for Adults, the Brief Resilience Scale, the 7 C's of Resilience, the City Resilience Framework, a bunch of resilience frameworks. And the challenge, as noted by many of the framework designers themselves, by the way, is that measuring resilience is really complicated and extremely difficult. You see, resilience is more the observation of the end state after the negotiation of the stress. In other words, it's kind of like those YouTube videos, you know, the ones of the people placing rubber bands around a watermelon until it explodes. You can't really understand how many rubber bands it's going to take to burst the watermelon until it actually does. And then you got to know how many rubber bands it's going to take. It actually depends on the watermelon, the number of bands, and how quickly you place them on. This is why most of the measurement frameworks simply try to identify the positive attributes of people or organizations that give them the capacity to have resilience. This capacity is really our ability to change, to form new approaches to future stresses. We see this in our work quite a bit. When we see true resilience in marketing practices and business, it's not that the team's ability to get back to normal operations after a crisis. No, resilience is instead best expressed in the way that the team is able to shape into new ideas, new forms that are required in the next form of normal. Great example of this is a content team we're working on right now. For the last 12 weeks, their whole world has been turned upside down by this crisis. And they've had no access to their enterprise content management system. They've been right in the midst of rolling out new standards and guidelines before the crisis began. They were trying to figure out their content marketing strategy, developing personas, journey maps, the whole bunch. Well, what they've been able to do over the last 12 weeks is incredible. They've been able to reprioritize, completely revisit their content stack, launch a contemporary set of communication platforms, and new workflow standards and guidelines to go along with it. Now, as things are starting to reopen, they're not thinking of going back. They're not thinking of changing back to the old way of doing things. Their jobs are reshaped. The technology stack is retooled. Governance and workflows are remade. They adapted. And now it's time for us to bounce forward a minute. It's time for our sponsor. That's right. It's our wonderful sponsor, the good folks at Sitecore. Thank you so much, Sitecore. And yeah, thinking about the right answer to solving the challenge of marketing and content, Sitecore has got you covered. You know, organizations all over the world are being forced to reevaluate their business plans and their marketing strategies. The luxury of being able to take a leisurely approach to digital transformation, it's no longer available. That's not an option anymore. Making human connections with customers in our suddenly digital heavy and that world should be a priority. Your digital transformation needs to be on the fast track. So, recognized by analysts as a leader in digital experience management, Sitecore can help you create memorable customer experiences that build brand trust and loyalty. I want you to go learn more, won't you? Do that at cmi.media/SitecoreDXP. That URL again, cmi.media/SitecoreDXP. I want to thank Sitecore and all the great people there for being our next and current wonderful sponsor. All right, so this week's news item, it's an interesting one, and it comes courtesy of Marketing Week. That's marketingweek.com. It's the UK-based magazine, so the numbers that you'll hear in just a second are primarily United Kingdom, UK-based numbers, which I guess now is just England, I guess, Brexit, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, somewhere with beans and eggs and sausage for breakfast. So the headline is that marketers should be planning for this economic bounce back. Yeah, sometimes the headlines, they really do just fit right in. They write themselves. The jokes write themselves sometimes, folks. I mean, is the economy going to bounce back? Is the economy resilient? The article opens up by saying, look, it's all bad news in the economy right now. We've heard that by quarter two, the GDP could be down by 35%. Unemployment is already at record highs. The comparisons between the economy now and previous economies are just becoming more and more and more common. There's every day a chart that's showing the distinct going down south at alarming speed. So it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. But in these developments, in this idea, new developments in the economy are not unexpected. And the government has made the decision, obviously, to lock down and also simultaneously, of course, made the decision that the economy would shrink as a result. But, says the article, well, now that many marketers have had this immediate response to the lockdown sorted out, now they're starting to focus on what's likely to happen next. And this, from three forecasts from reputable economists, including the International Monetary Fund, the Office of Budget Responsibility in the UK, and selections of experts from Bloomberg and others, they all expect a bounce back from pent-up demand that are going to see the economy bounce back to the way it was in 2019 by late 2021 or early 2022. As the article notes, Harvard Business Review even notes that economies that had this kind of steep decline after a pandemic, SARS in 2002, Hong Kong flu in 1968, Asian flu in 1958, Spanish flu in 1918, et cetera, the main point is that, of course, we marketers, we businesses, we should be planning for it right now. And so, just to the theme of our show and what will become clear when we have our interview with Katie in just a minute, I'd like to suggest that we start planning. That acceleration, those things are going to happen. For those that have already been listening, we were already counting on 2020 being a recession year. Do you remember back in the fourth quarter of 2019 when we were all really worried about the two dips in the Treasury note yield curve? That's the thing that indicates the relationship between short-term and long-term interest rates. How do I know that? Because back in 2019, I was learning about the inverted yield curve. Well, anyway, it's supposed to be an indicator of the last, all the recessions in the last 60 years. So not a lot of people are talking about the yield curves right about now. Why is that? Well, that's because, I don't know. The recession was coming anyway. COVID put a collapse on that. There's going to bounce back after this has come up. It's going to happen again. We don't know is the key. It's already happening. The future is already happening. And you need to prepare for all of it. Being ready for the change, that's what's key. Being resilient. As the article points out, marketers right now, response to the lockdown has been generally to pull all the spend with their marketing advertising and just basically lock everything down as well. There's an overwhelmingly pessimistic view of the economic outlook right now in the media, and some might even be prepared to lock it down further. And this is just it. There's going to be articles tomorrow, articles in the next day, articles in the next week that are going to talk about how this is the right approach, this is the wrong approach, and you're going to have to be willing and able to be resilient against all of it. We're going to need to go with the flow when it's advantageous. We're going to need to go against the flow when it's advantageous. And the only way to do that is to focus us and our teams on resilience. How can we optimize ourselves for whatever future has in store for us? We may indeed be ready for a bounce back, or we may be ready for a bounce backward. But either way, let's be ready to take advantage of the opportunity, because the opportunity for us is to be as resilient as changing the economy is. All right, so now it's time for our interview segment, a wonderful interview segment that we have this week on this week's show. It's Katie Martell. She is a self-described unapologetic marketing truth teller. I can totally vouch for that for her brand. She's whip smart. She's a marketing strategy in the B2B space, a content strategist. She was the executive director of the Boston Content Community, which was a community of content practitioners a few years ago. She's also the co-founder of a company called Martell, which was a B2B content marketing provider back in the day. She hosts the live social cast, Exceptional Truths. She's a writer. She's a speaker, live video host. She's just awesome. And she and I talked about a number of things, especially the accelerated change of B2B marketing in the world that we live in right now. And she's also got an upcoming documentary on the intersection of marketing and social movements. I promise you, you're going to love this interview with Katie. Katie, my friend, how are you doing?
Hey, Robert, how's it going? I'm doing good. I'm living the dream.
Living the dream in quarantine. I think that's the new saying, right?
It should be. And you know what? Somebody wise told me once that should really go onto a t-shirt. So if you'd like to start that online store, I'm in.
Nice. Now, is where you are still under lockdown, or is it are you reopening, or restaurants? What's going on there?
Depends on the day, I think. I live right outside of Boston, and we're pretty strict here when it comes to following the law and people being safe. I feel safe, which I know is a privilege these days, but from when I look outside the window, the world is still at a weird halt. So I'm going to say we're still in that just when is it safe mode. Over the weekend, I was amazed to see Memorial Day weekend, all of the crowds and the beaches, and it looked like it was a different world, like in the same country.
Yeah, it's been a little weird here in so we're in California, of course, and
yep.
And so we're here in Los Angeles and have still the strict lockdown, but just north of us is Santa Barbara County, and they have reopened restaurants. So we have a little place up there that we go to occasionally. And so this weekend, I have to tell you, was the first weekend I actually sat down in a restaurant. I mean, socially distanced, wearing masks, the whole thing, but I actually got to sit down, have a bottle of wine, have a meal. It was, I will tell you, it's pretty awesome.
Do you take anything for granted anymore? That pop of the cork from somebody else?
Exactly.
Silverware that you don't have to
exactly. Clean. I had to learn how to eat out again. It was this very weird, experience, but it was very enjoyable.
So like, where are my sweatpants?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there was that too. There was definitely the, do I actually have to get put on jeans for this? I actually have to get dressed. For those of the audience, you and I have known each other. Certainly online, we've known each other. I've been a long admirer of your work. For those in the audience who don't know you, tell us your story. Where did you come from? Where are you now? And how did you get there?
I was born, no, I'm just kidding. I honestly have had a very remarkably fun career, which I think is worth noting and important to say. What we do in marketing tends to be really stressful sometimes and very undervalued. And I'm very grateful that I stumbled into it after first realizing that music was not going to be a lucrative career. So took a right turn. Well, you can call it that. I played trombone, and it was not the sexiest instrument, but I loved it. But, it really wasn't career making. So my father told me about a decade plus ago that, Katie, you could talk a dog off a meat wagon. You really should get into sales or marketing. So I chose the one without the quota, and I have been working in B2B marketing for over a decade now. And oddly enough, for firms, both in-house and as a freelancer, that market to other marketers. So I've just been in this world of B2B marketing from every side of it, doing it, talking about it, criticizing it, laughing about it for a decade. And that's how I, of course, know you and Content Marketing Institute and see everything you do. But so it's always been at small firms. I'm a big believer that startup marketing, it makes some people, it breaks others. For me, it's fun. I like high growth. It allows for experimentation. You learn a lot from mistakes in that world, but you just keep going. So I give a lot of credit to the fact that I've worked in-house at these high growth B2B tech firms that have to keep pushing the envelope and just making things happen. So today, I've become independent. I'm an independent voice in the industry. For about 4 years now, I've just been on my own. That's after a stint of having my own Martell firm, which is an 18-month MBA, I call it. I recommend entrepreneurship to anybody on this call who can withstand the emotional torture, because it teaches you so much about yourself and about the world. So today I work with companies who are high growth, looking to be seen as, the leaders that they know themselves to be. But I also have a nickname that I got about 5 years ago of the unapologetic marketing truth teller. You got to pause. TM.
Nice.
It's
lean into that. Yeah, lean into that.
My friend called me that one day after a well-timed article. I was complaining about the pitfalls of femvertising, which is advertising that, of course, uses feminism in it. And he said, you're an unapologetic marketing truth teller. And I said, that's a great brand. I'm stealing it and I'm running with it. So
I like it.
It raises the bar.
You got Joe Polizzi in orange, and you got you, the unapologetic marketing truth teller.
It is liberating, my friend, because what it does is open the door for me to be able to say the things that everyone's thinking but nobody is saying out loud. I call those exceptional truths, and they are the most powerful piece of any kind of content, any platform, whether you're an activist or you're trying to campaign, to change a category in tech. It is the most powerful thing you can do.
I will tell you that you just segued beautifully into what I wanted to first ask you.
You're welcome.
Which is one of those beautiful unapologetic truths that you just wrote up, which just absolutely caught my attention, and I adored it and I liked it, and I wrote comments on it. It's such a fantastic post. It was about the idea that the changes, the crisis that we're going through now, quite frankly, have just accelerated changes that were already happening in the B2B marketing space. Tell me more, tell the audience more a little bit about what your thinking is there and why you think this is just an acceleration of things that were already in progress.
Yes, during these unprecedented times, right?
Right?
Unprecedented
exactly.
in quotes. First, let me tell you the origin of this article. As most of my pieces do online, it came from just a moment of frustration. And I'm sure everyone that's listening can relate to this. You're bombarded by the same words sometimes, and it makes you start, when you say a word over and over and over again, it loses its meaning.
Yeah.
Unprecedented has lost its meaning. And because we're all so uncertain and scared, we don't really know what to call the times we live in right now. It's a global pandemic. I totally get it. And I felt kind of frustrated, as if all of us, meaning all of us in B2B marketing, and marketing, capital M in general, had forgotten everything that we've learned over the last, 20, 25 years as the industry has gone digital. We are more prepared for this moment than I think we give ourselves credit for. And I don't blame us for feeling scared. I do believe that we're better suited to step up in the ways that our companies need us to right now than we tend to think, and that we've been writing about. So, there are some shifts that are happening because of the pandemic that were already happening. The first, for example, is this idea that, oh no, now there's a recession, now what? The truth is, right, at the end of 2019, this is well before we had the pandemic on there was already concerns about a recession. That's public information. You can Google it. Studies show that consumers were just predicting it to happen, and businesses, buyers, especially in B2B, were planning to make cuts already. So if you as a marketing team weren't already investing in retention and making sure that you're positioning the product as an invaluable part of a buyer's, consideration set, then you were already going to be screwed in 2020. It has nothing to do with the pandemic,
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. It's certainly something we've observed, right? I mean, even when we look at content strategy, content marketing, and the functional operation that was already starting to get put into place, all that really happened was all of those changes. And in fact, in many ways, it's been a bit of a challenge, because everybody kind of got what they wanted, right? I mean, it was like we were those that were preparing, we're setting into place, their strategies. And then all of a sudden, what would have normally been, okay, we're going to roll this out over the next 6 months, the next 8 months, the next year. It's like, no, roll it out by Monday.
Right.
And it's an amazing thing to see, how quickly, and I want to get your take on this, which is how quickly things can change in B2B when it needs to change, right? It's often in B2B, we often go, oh, it's going to take forever to turn the ship. We always talk about turning the ship, but in many ways, when there's an iceberg that's going to hit you, you turn it pretty darn quick.
Yes. And I think this is back to this old idea that the cost of, or the pain of staying has to outweigh the pain of change. And I think now the pain of staying outweighs the pain of change. We're all forced into this highly agile, way of operating. And that is a good thing. Can you imagine if every team was forced to recalibrate the way that everyone did in March, right? When they realized that they couldn't go out with the same campaigns, that they had to rejigger the messaging. Can you imagine if every team worked in that collaborative, yes, fire drill type way? But if that was a quarterly update, we'd never have irrelevant messaging. We'd never have, messaging that was tone deaf. We'd always have this constant review of, is what we're saying relevant? That should be the standard. And that's kind of what I argue in this piece, that not only were budget cuts coming, but we also have this sudden need to deal, which really isn't sudden, with a stressed out, overwhelmed buyer, right? Anxiety levels are spiking. Look, they're outside the camera frame. They're way up there. Guess what? 2 years ago, there was a study done that said Americans, in the US thought that it was the most stressful time in history for them, that they were more stressed out. This is in 2018 than they ever have been. This is more stressed out than 9/11, more stressed out than the Cuban Missile Crisis, more stressed out than the Vietnam War. And that was 2 years ago. So we were already dealing with buyers who were completely overwhelmed, meaning marketing has had to simplify and come up with, Gartner has some great thinking on buyer enablement. Basically means every content piece you produce has to make the decision process simple. We tend to overcomplicate it by dumping more information on a buyer who's doing research, right? We know that. You've done a lot of work to make sure that that's the case, right? Growing the content marketing practice. This is your fault, Robert. But what that means is we've got buyers who are now inundated with information and completely overwhelmed by it. So now, with the pandemic causing more anxiety, we've now had to remember that our job as content marketers is to simplify what the decision is and help the buyer through it. It's not about more PDFs. It's things like calculators, diagnostic tools, simulators, recommenders. Like, make it so easy for the buyer to make a decision that they can't help but choose you. That would be content nirvana. But guess what? It was content nirvana 5 years ago. Glad that we finally have a pandemic to remind us.
It's such a great point. I mean, I've used the concept of trust, right? Trust. When Edelman released their study, whatever it was, 2016, 2017, it was the lowest it had ever been, right? And maybe it's even lower now, but it's not that we don't know that. And creating, we, in so many ways, B2B organizations have become, just exactly to your point, have become resources rather than storytellers, where, sure, let's dump a bunch of, spec sheets and facts, and, here's an FAQ, and here's a white paper, and here's, it's all in our resource center. It's just a giant bucket of stuff, but there's no meaning there, right? you're not making it easier for the consumer. You're just saying, oh, if you want to go dig in this big bucket of stuff, you'll find what you're looking for, but we can't make it easy for you. That would be hard.
Simple is hard. Simple is really hard, especially when you're at an established firm that has, years and years of content. You don't want to lose that. But I think we lose the perspective that somebody on the other end, our poor beleaguered buyer who's in 20 of our nurture campaigns, that they're getting this very disjointed experience. And again, this is not new advice. This is just a reminder that we've got to look at it from their point of view. How are they interacting with us from day 1 to day 180, depending on how long your sales cycle is? Are you making it more complicated than it has to be? Kill it if it's actually making the decision harder. And you've got to be willing to take that content down and just make it easy. And I think that's difficult for many, many teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of great content, I know one of the things that's near and dear to your heart is something you've got upcoming, which is, it's just talking about great content. This idea of a documentary
Hmm.
you are working on or have finished. I want to hear this documentary talking about B2B brands and how they're pandering to these social movements and everything that's going on there. Tell me more about this.
Welcome to the age of woke washing and
Yeah, right?
virtue hustling and purpose-driven cause marketing campaigns ad nauseum. Just like I said earlier about this article, some of my most fervent frustrations eventually turn themselves into marketing content because I have been in content marketing for 10 plus years. So I think in terms of blog post titles. About 4 years ago, I started to chronicle this trend of companies using feminism in ad campaigns in March. Now, March is important because it's International Women's Day. We have one day a year that, you get to celebrate being female, and then it's back to the kitchen with, I'm kidding, I'm just joking. But it's this increasing, I'm a PR girl at heart, so I know that we live by the calendar. But March 8th, right, becomes the day to launch your femvertising campaign. That is an industry term, femvertising. And there is an awards program for femvertising because it celebrates the fact that these ads now have girl power, and they have tropes of women going for pay raises and breaking glass ceilings and having it all. I mean, this is much preferred to the body shaming and the kind of sexist, feminist, anti-feminist ads of the past 120 years. So we celebrate them as an industry. And I was getting really awkwardly annoyed by all these ads. And the feminist in me was like, isn't this a good thing? Isn't this progress, right? That KPMG has an ad about a female golfer hitting the glass ceiling. And then I started looking. I'm not an investigative journalist. I don't claim to be, but I Googled, because that's the tool I have, some of the behavior of these companies. And I found things like KPMG settling multi-$100 million lawsuit alleging a pattern of gender discrimination and denying promotions to women, firing them for taking pregnancy leave, next to this beautiful ad of them sponsoring the women's golf tournament and a woman breaking glass ceilings. And it just the juxtaposition, I was like, okay, that's not good. That's not right. And I started to look at this across multiple campaigns. It's not just B2B brands. It's mostly consumer brands that do this. They do it in June. Next month is Pride Month. People get ready for the rainbow washing. We're thrilled
Right.
to have your support. Let me tell you, we would much prefer the support rather than the potentially being ostracized from the community. However, if you're gonna do a rainbow washed campaign or put the banner up in the store or feature your gay employees on your law firm blog, whatever it is, are you giving them the protection they need? Do you have the right kind of employee experience with bias training, family leave that is appropriate for same-sex couples, transgender training internally for those? Are you doing the things internally for your employees that make it okay for you to launch this rainbow themed marketing externally? You can do this for greenwashing around environmental concerns. You can do this around literally any social movement, from guns, right, to you name it. And so what we have here is it's called pandermonium. It's brands that are pandering to social movements in order to gain affinity, Robert, to your point, to earn trust, and most importantly, to differentiate from the competition. I just believe if this is the new normal, we need new rules of engagement. And that's what the documentary and the book will hopefully set forth.
Boy, I can't, I got to tell you, I can't wait to see it because first of all, kudos on the title. What a great title.
That is a shout out to Kathy Klote's guest who tweeted at me one day and
said,
KKG.
Hey, girl,
yes, you got it. And she said, that's pandemonium. And I said, that's a great title. I just like to,
that is fantastic.
There's no better word for it.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah, that is perfect. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we do some work in this space, and I will tell you, one B2B company, global company, same kind of thing. And it's worse than that. They not only don't live up to the things that they're doing, but they're doing so many things. In other words, and the quote that the money quote from someone who said to me, basically, anybody with a budget can publish to the website. And so they do, right? The 5K, the fact that we're using, recyclable cups, and we're using, we have donuts made with stevia because the sugar farms or what, all this stuff is going on. And it finally reached a breaking point when there was a C-suite executive in front of a reporter who asked him about some landing page on the website that was for recycling or something like that. And he was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's like, that's not good.
That is pandering
definitely not
101.
good.
And it comes from a very good place. It comes from this place of wanting to be part of the zeitgeist, part of the global narratives that are happening. But what we see is that a lot of teams look at it like a marketing problem, when in actuality, it's something that the CEO should be able to articulate down, and someone that the janitor should be able to articulate from the bottom up. It's really a matter of, are you reflecting the values the organization is living every day? Or are you simply saying the things that you want, insert minority group here, to hear in order to gain their affinity and look like you're part of the trend? I mean, it's a very simple situation, but we also see pandering to the pandemic. I mean, talk about a global narrative.
Oh, right.
There are lots of companies that are saying, we're here for you, we got you, but doing very little to actually help either their customers or, more importantly, the broader effort to stop the pandemic.
It's amazing. Well, my friend, I could talk to you all day about this.
Sorry.
This is totally fun. In the interest, however, of time, and by the way, congratulations! You're the first video guest on the Weekly Wrap, so that's kind of awesome. Tell people where they can connect with you, where it would be great to meet you online, to figure out where your content is, all that stuff.
You can Google me, and I hate to be so arrogant about that, but if you can't Google a marketer or someone who claims to be in the public eye, you can't hire them. So just Google Katie Martell, you'll find me. But thank you so much, Robert, for letting me talk your ear off about what I think is a really, really important issue of pandemonium. And so more information on my website about that. It will be out later this year, although we're working on it now, so it could be sooner.
Very, very good. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Katie. I so appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Robert.
And that brings us to our last segment, which is one post on CMI's site that I'd love for you to take a second look at, or a first look at, depending on your point of view. And it's from me this week. I don't know what I'm thinking about, but I just wanted to get it right because this is a post that I think is fantastic. It's from our research team, really. They put out great research all of the time, and it's our latest research. If you didn't see it, it's a wonderful, wonderful product. As I talk about in the blog post, right now, these are scary times for managers and companies. 20 years ago to the day, one of my heroes, Clayton Christensen, wrote exactly those words. He said, it's a scary time for managers. And of course, he was talking about the turn of the century, the dot-com bust, the global economic recession that was happening. And he said that before managers rush in and make any kind of choice about the capabilities they're going to develop or not develop, they have to understand the problem. Understanding the problem, he said, is the first part of making sure we can solve it. So this is our 4th year in a row that we've published this research, and I just find it really illuminating in helping to solve problems for clients and for content marketers all over the world. It's about content management. It's about content strategy. It's been our wonderful research for these 4 years talking about these topics, really helping to create, manage, scale enterprise content and marketing strategies. And additionally, how content teams are using these new technologies and new processes and governance frameworks to do precisely that. Provide a better, more valuable customer experience across the entirety of the customer journey. Just a wonderful post, if I do say so myself. And of course, even better, just download the research itself. And that's it for our first video episode and our latest podcast episode of episode number 72. I hope you're all figuring things out, staying warm where it's cold, staying cool where it's hot, making time for yourself for sure, making time to do nothing. One thing that I'm extremely grateful for is that you've got the patience to listen and hear if you're watching this show, and I hope you're digging it. We're having a ton of fun making this show, and so hit us up on social media, won't you? Hashtag us up, Weekly Wrap. Let us know what you want on the show. Let us know any guests. Let us know any news items. Can always use the new news items. And if you hate the show, like you just watched this video for the first time or you listened to the podcast for the first time and you just didn't like it, don't watch again. It doesn't matter. And just don't watch it again. In the immortal words of Motley Crue, And now, yeah, it is time to change. How is resilience measured? In our work, we've found that there's a combination of attributes that can really help our ability to measure our capacity to bounce forward and be resilient. We like to look at it through the lens of resilience as the capacity for adaptation informed by our conscious intention. And that might sound a little weird, but what I mean by that is when we're stressed, pressed, bent out of shape, and we have tasks in front of us, we can look to whatever the challenge is and ask ourselves 3 questions. 1, what is our capacity to adapt this to something new? 2, what is our conscious intention of that change for this thing, if we even have one? And 3, if this thing changed, informed by our current intention, would that move us forward or would that move us backward? The measure of these things can be our measure of resilience. Put simply, resilience isn't the ability to bounce back after disruptions. Resilience is the ability to bounce forward because of the disruptions that challenge us to adapt. It's your story, folks. Tell it well. We'll see you next week on the Weekly Wrap.